Hello and welcome to the Dream Architect Life with Brian Sweet and Brittany Anderson from Sweet Financial Partners. Brian and Brittany, you guys look great. How are you?
Well, we are amazing as always. Is there any other way to be?
Boy, I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Brittany.
I've always thought you're amazing. This is just, hopefully anybody who's just joining us, you're going to find out that very, very quickly. Now, I know this podcast we're kind of taking a different direction because we just wrapped up a bit of a series and it was awesome. If you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen. But now we're pivoting a little bit. What are we doing today?
Well, we've got some exciting stuff in store for you over the next few episodes. So we came off recently of a longer term series. And one of the things that we didn't mention much during is that it was actually highlighted after our book and the content that was in there. So that book, for those listening, depending upon when you're listening to this episode, it launched on June 14th of 2022. And I think, Brian, you might have kind of a cool thing to share that we recently found out about that book.
Yeah, this is really exciting and totally unexpected, by the way, but I love this kind of news. So Forbes notified us actually last week that we were named one of 8 authors who can positively change your future. And it was all about our dream architecture book, and what a nice honor to be in that category. So we were amazed and very positively affected by it. Made for a really good week, by the way.
Yeah, no kidding. I think a few people have heard of Forbes. That's amazing.
One or two.
Yeah, one or two. There's got people out there. That is congratulations, you guys. That is a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we're real pleased.
Yeah, we've been so humbled by it, and we've been having a lot of fun. We came off of the series where we talked about content from the book. Even if we didn't say it, that's what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And then we've been having some really great interviews, some great conversations. So if you have been tuning in for a while, you know that you've been on that journey with us and have heard some of the brilliance that we've been able to capture. And we decided, we get asked all the time about what books we're reading right now. A lot of people know after following Brian and I for a while that we are book junkies. We love to read. We love new ideas, new concepts. So we decided to take it a step further and highlight a book that impacted both of us recently. This particular book that we'll spend the next few episodes highlighting, it's Ed Milet's The Power of One More. And part of the reason we decided to do this is that, number one, there's a lot of people out there who like the 5-minute high-level version of a book rather than sitting and digesting the entire thing. But number two, there were some really eerie similarities between what we've been talking about for months on the podcast, what we actually wrote in our book. What many people don't know is that we actually started Dream Architecture in the height of that little thing called COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So we've been working on this content for a really long time, and we thought, wow, to be able to bring another person's brilliance to our listeners and highlight some of the really impactful moments and chapters from the book to hopefully give you as a listener some good takeaways and some things that you could actually implement immediately.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting title, The Power of One More. It's a very simple premise, but very, very powerful. And as we'll talk about in some of the next episodes, if you just think about it, doing one more of virtually anything, one more sit-up, one more push-up, if you're talking exercise, can have a profound effect on the results over a long period of time. And he puts it in such an interesting format that it seemed, as Brittany alluded to, really ties into our message in the Dream Architecture book.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and I'm excited for that. But I don't want to gloss over something you said, Brittany, very, very quickly. You guys really wrote this book, your book, specifically, like you said, kind of during the pandemic. And to be that positive during that time, to write a book like you guys did, and then to have it kind of mirrored in the book that you're going to discuss now, that's no small feat. I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just going to say, I think these are just principles that Brittany and I live by. And when times were tough and we were all going through this kind of together, these are just things that we found that by consistently doing them, the bad periods were made better, and you had a brighter outlook. And if it worked for us, it could probably work for others, and we wanted to make sure those concepts got shared.
And I'll add one more thing to that too. When you think about tough times, regardless of if it's a global pandemic or you're just having a bad day or a bad week, or maybe it's been a rough month, a rough year, we all have stuff. It's all about that little word that we've talked about quite a bit, intentionality. It's about being intentional in where you're putting your energy, your attention, your focus, and making sure that you are highlighting the silver lining, because even in the darkest, toughest of times, which we've all faced, there's always something good that you can pull out of it. So it's all about where you put your attention and where you put your intention too.
All right. Well, where do we start with this new book?
Yeah. So again, we're highlighting Ed Milet's The Power of One More, if you're just tuning in and decided to skip through the beginning of this podcast. And the first topic we're going to highlight is the one more identity. Now, we chose this particular topic because so many people get to retirement. And I'm going to put a little context around this. So oftentimes at Sweet Financial, we end up working with business owners. We end up working with kind of a C-suite type position where somebody has had great purpose for their lives. They've had a team to lead. They've had a business to run. They've had, I guess, a little bit of importance in how they showed up in life. And the saddest thing, I guess you could say, that you see is when people get into this state of retirement, going from something to something else, they oftentimes leave their identity wrapped into what they've done and what they've accomplished versus who they truly are. So that's why this particular chapter we felt was so relevant to our listeners, because it's absolutely detrimental to your future to hang on to who you were and what you did in the past when there's so much more ahead of you and there's so much more capability. I mean, I'll pick on Brian because he's sitting right next to me, but I think about, he's not going to retire by any sense of that word. But, what he has done is he's gotten to certain points in his career where he's pivoted, and there's always something to look forward to. There's always something new to achieve, new to create, new impact to put out into the world. And that's what gets him excited and gets him out of bed in the morning. When you lose that, when you don't have that sense of purpose, that new thing to be excited about, that's when, I'm going to put this bluntly, your soul kind of starts dying because there's nothing to look forward to in the future. So that's really the context around it. Brian, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add there before we dive into a couple of the power concepts.
Yeah, no, we just see that, unfortunately, an awful lot when people retire. They're going from something, but they don't have anything to go to. Mm-hmm. And it can really cause some problems. And it's also one of the reasons why we're developing the Dream Architect Life platform. And one of the pillars is purpose. We want to help people find that purpose and that why. And Ed talks about it very well, and that's why Brittany wants to start the initial podcast on that topic.
Yeah, so there is a power statement in here, and I'm going to take it as a direct quote. Are you willing to sacrifice who you are for who you could be? So I think that's something to marinate on a little bit as we get into this. There's this whole concept, and I thought this was really powerful. Personally, I felt I could relate to it, and I literally started going through the Rolodex of people in my life that I thought, wow, this is true. So Ed talks about how if you're a 75-degree person, like that's where you're comfortable. You think about this from the aspect of your life. If you're comfortable at that 75 degrees, maybe you've achieved a certain level of success and you're like, I feel pretty good here. Like, this is really kind of what I wanted. I feel, good about my, my future, my family, my whatever. What happens a lot of times is that when we start cranking things up to go above that 75 degrees in our lives, what ends up happening is we start pulling that thermostat back. We're we're like, wait a second, we're achieving more than what we perceive in our mind to be, I guess, deserving of, capable of, whatever. And we end up actually cutting ourselves off at the knees and not accomplishing what we were put on this earth to do. So again, you can put the adage of, maybe you've had a great successful career, like, oh, I've had my time, or I'm too old, or I'm too tired, or I'm too whatever. None of that stuff really matters. And we have to lean into this next level identity that we have for ourselves. We're put on this earth for a reason, and it's our job to find out why.
Yeah, I was just listening to a great podcast the other day with Lewis Howes and Gino Wickman, who created Traction, the EOS system, and they were just talking about success and things like that. And Gino said, the first thing to success is you have to feel like you deserve it. And, that's so powerful. And a lot of people don't reach the level of, what their success could be because they don't feel like they deserve it. So I thought that kind of tied in with what you were saying, Brittany.
How do you change your mentality? How do you change your frame of thought to allow yourself to feel as though you could deserve it? Do you guys have any tips for that?
Yes. But I think the number one thing is, just opening yourself up to the content, material, resources that are out there, to start actually putting your antennas to examples of that. Examples of where people have, gone beyond their current, what they see as maybe a limiting belief. But second, I can say this personally, I know Brian's going to agree, putting yourself in rooms with people who believe that, not only of themselves, but of you too. I've had more encouragement from people that on paper could technically be called kind of strangers than some of the people that I've had in my life for forever. And, it's just about getting around that mindset where people are constantly looking at, hey, yeah, I've achieved this or I've accomplished this, but I'm not done yet. And there's more impact and more to put out into the world than what I've gotten to at this point.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And it's really about those people you associate with. And if they're encouragers and, wish you to be better and whatever you can accomplish, that's what you're going to start thinking you can do. And consequently, if they're saying, well, what are you thinking about that for? That's a ridiculous idea. Pretty soon you're going to start thinking, well, they must be accurate. So it's like pick the genie on your shoulder and which one do you want talking to you? It's the positive, encouraging, motivating version that you want to spend virtually all your time with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard the statement, burn the ships, right? I think most people have heard that. Does that relate to being able to put that past, those past accomplishments, those past, accolades, the trophies, just put those in the past because you can't dwell on those. We all know most of us know that high school quarterback that lives that moment into their late 30s or early 40s. And you're like,
or longer.
Or longer. That's great. Way to go. But that's not who you are anymore. And you should have other things to be able to, to accomplish, right? Is that kind of the concept here? Just burn the ship. You've got to be able to move on.
Yeah, especially when it comes to, and again, I want to center back around today's topic, which is identity. And that's where I think people can get hung up in that, well, I've achieved this level of success. I've achieved this sense of greatness. My time is up. It's time to pass the baton to somebody else. It's like, well, you can pass the baton in what you used to do and who you were, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go after a bigger future for yourself. So the burning the ship, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about here. And understanding, there's actually a definition, and I want to make sure I get this right, but Ed talks about in this particular chapter, identity is what you believe you're worth. Self-confidence is the means to deliver on it. And I think that's a really interesting kind of pivot when you think about burning the ships. You know what you came from, you know what you've accomplished up to this point, or maybe what you haven't accomplished that you're feeling maybe a little bit down, or what Dan Sullivan, the founder, creator of Strategic Coach, would call the gap, where you're like, well, I just feel like I'm stuck. I haven't done enough. I haven't accomplished enough. And it's like, okay, well, that's all up to this point. Let's look forward. let's look at what you can become or who you can become next, and then help you build up the confidence to take a step forward. Brian and I talk about this a lot, about how, sometimes you just have to put yourself out there. We were at the annual Genius Network event in early February of 2022. And there was a talk that a gentleman gave. His name's Steve Sims. And he talked about this whole concept of just ask. And how, so many things in life become possible because someone had the courage just to put one foot forward and ask for what they want, put it out into the world, what they want to accomplish, what they want to achieve, maybe what they don't want anymore. So that's something that is such a powerful thing. Again, when you think about this next level identity and leaning into who you are as a human being and why you're put on this earth and the value you still have to put out into the world, sometimes you just got to lean in a little bit and understand that your job, your company even, that's not who you are. That's what you've accomplished, but that's not who you are as a person. Who you are, now it's your turn to put that out into the world and really add the value that you're put here to do.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's just hard to do, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be very conscious of it, and it's got to be front of mind virtually daily for it to actually take hold.
Yeah. And I think there's another thing too. I love what Ed talked about, how he said misconceptions around self-confidence. Okay. And I think a lot of times people look at your identity and your self-confidence can maybe be a little bit synonymous or very intertwined, because somebody who maybe appears self-confident has then the courage to step into what they're capable of, or whatever that new venture is, or that new purpose. So Ed talks about some of the misconceptions around self-confidence being, I am what I possess. I am my accomplishments. I am what people say I am. That's a big one, especially if you're in the public eye. I am, or what I look like, means everything. And these are things that we want to encourage people to really let go of, and why we talk all the time about creating your definition of success. Because if you start chasing things that other people perceive as important for your life, if you start, trying to pursue something just for, the accolades that come with it or whatever, that's not going to create fulfillment. And we're going to get stuck in this identity trap again. What was it? Something about the once in a lifetime opportunity. If it's the wrong one, that's not a good thing. There's a lot of people that have these once in a lifetime opportunities, but if it's not aligned with what you define to be a success for your own life, well, it's kind of all for nothing.
Exactly.
Not super important.
That's a lot to think about, a lot to digest up to this point. I love this book so far, and I haven't even read it.
We did too.
Yeah, a lot of synergies.
Yeah. And, I think there's a big kind of underlying theme in this whole concept, this whole chapter, as it relates to what we talk about under the Dream Architect as a process within Sweet Financial, is carrying people along to say, all right, you've gotten to a certain point, you know what it means to create maybe a certain level of wealth, create a level of success that you've defined to be important up to this point. But now it's time for the really good stuff. It's time to really put that wealth to work for you and create this life that you're excited about and that is intentional and meaningful and purposeful. And you can't do that. You can't step forward, at least not very easily, if you're holding on to this past identity of who you were. Now it's time to lean into who you aspire to be. I think about the book we reference all the time, Dan Sullivan, and we've referenced before Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Ben has a new book. It's, oh my gosh, I'm just blanking on it right now, Brian. Help me out.
Be your future self now.
Be your future self now. Yeah. Yeah. And, we feel like we eat, sleep, and breathe Ben's content. So, one of the things that we thought was so powerful in there is about how you really need to define who you want to be in the future. Like, who is future Brittany? Who is future Brian? Who's future Eric? And start actually acting as if those things were true today. So let's just use a really simple one. Let's say that your whole life you've been chasing your career and you've been busy and you've been gone and you've been whatever. And now you have aspirations to be a more intentional family person. We've heard this from some of our business owner clients. Well, you need to start acting like that person today, right? So put something on the calendar. Make sure that this week you're doing the things that you aspire to do so that you're getting the momentum to move towards who that future person is. So this can be a little bit of a high level concept or feel woo-woo to the more like tactical brain, but really it's about, again, creating this identity and not feeling like you're saying one thing and doing another. So, really make sure that you're being intentional in your actions when it comes to that identity.
Yeah. And I think what happens is we fortunately or unfortunately give ourselves titles, and then we start believing those titles when it might be something that somebody else gave us, or it might be, example is retiree, empty nester, divorcee, widow. And depending on what your perception is of that word, you might start acting that way, which may not be you at all. And so you have to be really careful of titles that you give yourself or others put upon you, because if it's not truly who you are, it might force you to act differently. And so, this identity, one more identity concept is just really ties into a lot of different concepts, as Brittany had mentioned with, be your future self now also. But it's really being conscious of, what that looks like down the road. What do I need to do today so that I can be more like that? And just strive to be that person every single day and make a little bit of progress.
Yeah, I think the titles, it's a beautiful concept, but I think it can be a very positive thing if you write your own titles and then order them in the order that you want them. So going back to Brittany's point, if you've got a business owner that wants to be a better family person, then they need to concentrate on that title of husband or wife or parent or grandparent. And
exactly,
that practice that you're talking about. You said a woo-woo moment, Brittany. I have termed it a wah-wah moment for my family in a lot of ways, and it started when my kids were a little bit younger because of cell phones. Wah-wah it's W-A-W-W-W-A-W, so it's wah-wah. We are with who we are with, right? That's what I had to tell them. Put the cell phone down. We're playing a family game. You're with who you're with. So we are with who we're with. Let's concentrate on that. And for business owners, it's so difficult because we're constantly churning, constantly grinding on something, constantly thinking about something else, even when we're out of the office. So putting that into practice, when it's the weekend, it's time to shut the business side down and be the husband, the father, the wife, the mother, whatever title you want to be better at. That's the time to practice.
That is so good. I love that.
Well said.
Acronym. That's brilliant. And I think that's such a great point, because again, the high achieving brain, and I'll use myself as an example here. I have been trying to be so much more intentional about just sticking my phone on the charger when I get home and walking away from it, because it's like I can't help it sometimes. Like I'll see a great article and I need to read it, or I need to see, oh my gosh, this person just shared this and it's so brilliant. I got to write down that quote to use in the future. But I have caught myself, and my middle child is the one that will call you out on the spot, but I've caught myself, even with my phone put away, my brain, it never shuts off. So one of the things that I do, or have been trying to do lately especially, is the whole affirmations, like I'm a present person, I'm a present person, I'm a present person. And it goes back to what you're saying, that, it can be hurtful to the people around you when you're not mentally there, because all of a sudden they're going to stop talking to you. They're going to stop, trying to engage with you because they know you're not paying attention anyway. So that's one thing that for my own life, when I think about my identity, I don't want my kids to think of me as the non-mentally present, businesswoman. That's not the identity I want them to see. I want them to see a mama who loves them and pays attention and is present and is fun to be around. So that's something that I'm doing for myself. And I think we can all think about that at different stages of our life, be it with kids, friends, family members, spouses, whatever. You got to decide who you want to be and actually act on it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you can do to help move that along, if you will, is just make a couple of lists. One would be, what are the titles that you're currently using that you really don't think you want to be like, so that you're aware of them and now try to quit using them. But maybe even more importantly, what are the titles that you would love to have attached to you, and what do you want to become? And then what do I need to be doing to be more like that? And it's just like anything. Whatever you put your mind on, the results will follow suit, because your brain doesn't know anything different about any data that you put into it, but it's going to go out and find what you think about most. So as we've said before, if you're thinking negative thoughts, negative results, you're going to have negative thoughts and negative results. If you think, I'm going to be really successful, I'm going to be a great husband, I'm going to be, whatever it happens to be, that's really what happens. I mean, I've just personally have had that happen so many times. It's just, I don't know how it works. It works, but I don't know how. So just put the things in your brain that you personally, whether it's titles or otherwise, want to become or be identified with.
Absolutely. All right. Any closing thoughts for today's podcast?
I think one of the things we really want people to do coming off of these podcasts is to have something tangible that they can take action on. So just like Brian was just talking about, take a few minutes immediately after this. Now, if you're driving, if you're like me and you listen to a lot of podcasts while you're driving, be careful.
Yeah.
But when you get a moment, really start thinking about, what are the titles I hold on to right now? What maybe doesn't serve who I truly am or who I truly want to be? And then start making that other list of the things that you do aspire to, of who you feel you are within your heart deep down, and start taking action towards that. And to support that, again, that book that we referenced, Be Your Future Self Now by Benjamin Hardy, it's a great read, especially for people that this is a newer topic. This is something that maybe makes you feel a little uncomfortable, like, okay, who I was, who I am, who I'm going to be. Well, that's a lot to deal with. There's a lot to take in. That's another great book, in addition to, obviously, Ed Milet's The Power of One More, and, little shameless plug, Dream Architecture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian and Brittany, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. I'm looking for the next episode.
Us too, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great, Eric. Thanks so much.
You bet. And our last thank you is for you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Dream Architect Life podcast with Brian Sweet and Brittany Anderson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Brian and Brittany come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help other people find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Sweet Financial Partners, this is Eric Johnson reminding you that possibility comes to those who create it. And we'll see you next time.